At the end of April, I finally started learning Korean, and I spent the entire month of May trying to figure out what resources to use, a good study routine, and how to balance learning Korean while still studying Japanese and Spanish. By the end of May, I felt completely overwhelmed because I had a plethora of resources, I didn't have a solid study routine, and I wasn't very consistent in my study habits. So today I want to share with you all what I was doing in May that I'm no longer doing in June and why I think it's way better. But first, for more language-related content, subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon to be notified when I post a new video. So like I mentioned before, I was using a lot of different resources. I started off with Talk to Me in Korean, I looked at 90-day Korean, I was using a website called howtostudykorean.com along with a bunch of other websites as I was looking up different grammar and vocabulary in Korean. I started using Pimsleur Korean, 3 different italki tutors, and various apps that I found on the App Store. It was a lot. However, this month I decided I will not be using Talk to Me in Korean or 90-day Korean because it just wasn't for me. While I liked that Talk to Me in Korean had a bunch of free resources, I felt like the grammar explanations were really shallow and I wasn't really fully understanding what it is I was supposed to be learning. For example, those Korean object, subject, and topic particles, I was really confused when they were explaining that. I know for other people they really like Talk to Me in Korean, but it's just not for me. Then with 90-day Korean, I did their free trial to join their inner circle, and I was just really overwhelmed by all of the resources. And then I also decided I didn't want to pay for a lot of different resources, so I also, for that reason, decided to no longer continue with 90-day Korean. And instead, I decided to use howtostudykorean.com. It's a completely free resource, although there are some paid features just like with Talk to Me in Korean. However, they go really in depth in grammar explanations and each lesson comes with a list of vocabulary. So I really like the structure of that website. I also decided to stick with Pimsleur Korean because I felt like it was a way for me to practice my speaking before I felt ready to work with a tutor. If you don't know anything about Pimsleur, I have a video that I'll link up above so you can see my review on a different Pimsleur language, but they pretty much all work the same way. I like that Pimsleur gets you speaking right away, and I think that really helps with my confidence when learning a new language. And finally, I am sticking with italki, but instead of working with 3 different tutors, I'm currently working with 1. In the future, I do plan on using a second tutor that I use just for conversation practice, but right now the tutor that I'm currently with, I really like how she explains the grammar and we do a lot of practice during our lessons, and recently she started giving me homework, so I really like working with her. Having 3 tutors last month was a bit hectic because they all taught different things in the very first lesson, even though all 3 of them knew that I was a beginner. There was one tutor who wasn't even prepared for our lesson and said so during the first 10 minutes of our lesson, and she was a professional tutor, so she cost a little bit more. So I've definitely realized who I wanted to work with and who I didn't want to work with. So a quick recap of all the resources I'm using in June: howtostudykorean.com, Pimsleur Korean, and 1 italki tutor. There's also an app that I've recently started using, but I'm not quite sure if I'll keep that in my study routine, so I won't mention it just yet. Along with having a lot of resources I was using last month, I also didn't have a solid study routine. So I would use Pimsleur one day, howtostudykorean.com another. I would spend all my time on talktomeinkorean.com because some of the lessons were really short, so I could get through 5 in one day. Then I would go back to Pimsleur, and it was just kind of all over the place. I wasn't sticking with one resource long enough to feel like I was really getting good at the lesson. For example, if I would do maybe half a lesson of how to study Korean, then I would jump to another lesson. So I never really fully comprehended the lesson that I was just learning with howtostudykorean.com. So now for June, I've decided I'll do one howtostudykorean.com lesson per day. Unless it's a really complex grammatical topic, then I'll break that into 2 or 3 days. I do 3 Pimsleur lessons a week. That way I give myself time to review the previous vocabulary before moving on to the next lesson. And I have one italki tutor that I meet with per week. And after that, I do the homework that she gives me over the course of 2 days, 1 or 2 days. My routine is a lot better now because, like I said before, I was jumping around so much, I wasn't sticking to anything, and it was making my progress really slow. And now I feel like I'm actually making a lot more progress in Korean than I was last month. What does your study routine look like? Finally, the third thing I was struggling with last month was finding a good balance for incorporating Korean into my existing Japanese and Spanish study habits. For example, last month I would go days without studying Japanese or Spanish because I was focusing all my time on trying to figure out how to study Korean. Or I would go days without studying Korean because I realized I went days without studying Japanese, and I would do a lot of Japanese study, and it just didn't seem productive in that way. So for me, I'm one of those people where if I don't schedule something, I kind of forget to do it because I get caught up with something else. So for the month of June, what's been really helpful is setting aside a weekly planner so I know when I'm studying Japanese, when I'm studying Korean, and when I'm studying Spanish. For example, what really works for me is listening to a podcast in Spanish on my way to work. And when I get to work, I usually have to do some kind of cleaning before the store opens. So I'll talk to myself in Spanish about what I plan on doing or what I've already done in the previous days, just to kind of get myself in the Spanish mode. And later on during the day, I'm actually able to speak a little bit of Spanish with some of my coworkers, since most of them do speak Spanish. And that's kind of enough Spanish for me for the day, since I'm just really focusing on improving my conversational abilities. And then for Japanese and Korean, I study that after work in the evening. From around 6 to 11 p.m., I set aside dedicated study time for Korean and Japanese. I'm not extremely strict on when I study each language, as long as I make sure I know what lessons I want to get through and each of the resources I'm using for both languages. For example, I might start Korean at 6 and stop studying it at 7, then go study Japanese from 7:30 to 8, then go back to Korean. Sometimes I'll just spend half of that time studying Korean and then half of that time studying Japanese. For me, as long as I have that set time blocked out, I don't need to be very specific about when I'm going to study Korean and Japanese. Again, the most important thing for me is that I have that set time put aside to study Japanese and Korean, and I know what resources I'm using and how far I want to get in those resources. Since I'm new to studying Korean, the resources I'm using could potentially change, my study routine might change, and the way I'm balancing learning Korean, Japanese, and Spanish might also change. But for now, this is what's working for me, and I plan to stick to this for a while, or at least until mid-July. But as I'm still new to learning Korean, if there are any resources that any of you recommend, let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching.